Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. This is James from Boss Upstairs. It is May 8th, Thursday, and we're going to get right into this video on the NAIA airport accident and liabilities of owning, driving, buying, and selling your scooter, your car, your motorcycle, anything like that, because they all tie in together. So let's get on with this video. I was holding off for a couple days. I wanted to get more facts, and I didn't want to post the video until things kind of settle down a little bit. So we'll discuss that, and the liabilities of vehicle ownership, whether it's again a car, a motorcycle, scooter, tricycle, the buying and selling of one. So if any of us have bought or sold, there is some tremendous liability if the paperwork is not done correctly, and you'll see that in the NAIA accident. Will actually show you that and what the problems could arise for a lot of people. Now, our prayers are with all of the victims in that and their families. What it reveals about the responsibilities we carry as drivers and vehicle owners, and yes, even foreigners navigating these roads. So we really have to look at that and look at our situation, and that's what this video is about, is how do we learn from it. We're going to break down what actually happened in the NAIA accident. So as expats, we need to understand not just the laws, but the realities, and how even being in the right doesn't always protect you from legal and financial consequences. So stick around. This could save you a lot of trouble, and even save you from staying out of any litigation or hurting somebody, most importantly, or somebody hurting you or your family. So let's watch this. So this past Sunday at NAIA Airport, there was an accident, as you all probably already have seen it on the news, and you have already might have seen some of these videos, I'm not sure. Some of them are very graphic. I put the disclaimers in there. Please do not have children watch these if possible. You will see a SUV driver who actually works for a transportation company. We don't know which transportation company it is. It could be Grab, it could be a private airport transport, but driving a black SUV, and he proceeded to drop a passenger off. So he parked, and as you can see here in the video, this is the video that actually shows the SUV jolting forward, crossing over and going right into the pedestrians in Terminal 1 that were standing there waiting, passengers that had got off their plane, or passengers who were waiting for other friends or family to come there, or passengers that were ready to leave, saying their goodbyes to their families, having their luggage there. This black SUV just all of a sudden, after the driver dropped the luggage off, removed the luggage from the SUV and handed it to his passengers, and he got back in the SUV, and the SUV just jolted right in front and ran through the barriers, stainless barriers. You see them right here. Now these barriers are not very good, as you can see now, and the airport is rethinking this from some of the stories that I read, putting stronger barriers up there, which I think is a great idea. A little late now, however, for the two people that died, and one was a little girl, a 5-year-old girl, the other was a 29-year-old man that was there on business. So he plowed through, he injured many other people. Now you're going to see here where right after the accident, the authorities, nobody thinks this was an intentional, drive through the barrier and let's run over some people. That's not how this went down. Now, his explanation was that he panicked and hit the gas instead of the brake. And he said that a car had pulled in front of him, and that's when he got confused and panicked, and then he jolted forward by accident by hitting the gas pedal and not the brake. However, authorities, after reviewing the CCTV, and after you yourself can review the CCTV to find that's not true. There was no vehicle that passed him in the front. So we are still not sure, they're still investigating, but we're not sure as to why his car jolted forward. Now there are some theories, and you'll see them on YouTube videos about the shifter and the gas and the brake and how it may have happened by accident. I do believe, my opinion, it was an accident. I do believe that. So the driver's name is Leo Sinloa Gonzalez. He's 47 years old, and he's a resident of Batangas. Now, this incident occurred again on Sunday morning when Gonzalez, driving a black Ford Everest, reportedly dropped off a passenger at the departure area. After assisting with the luggage, the vehicle suddenly accelerated, crashing through the outer railing and into the terminal entrance walkway. The crash resulted in the deaths of a 5-year-old girl and a 29-year-old man, with many other injuries. So you guys, this is a terrible accident that no one would ever think would happen when you go to the airport. You know, we talk about, well, we're going to go to the airport. You think that there's going to be any tragedy regarding our trip to the airport, it's going to most likely be up in the air, not just standing, you know, in the passenger zone there outside of Terminal 1's exit gates or entrance gates. And then here you can see they're actually placing him on the ground, and I believe from what I can see, you might be able to help with this and look at this and maybe send me some comments, but it looks like they are arresting him at this point. And this next part of the video is the environment of what's going on with all the people, the chaos. So I felt I needed to leave that in because
Ayan, hindi naman yan sinasadya eh. Ay, Diyos ko. Ay, wag! Disgrasya yan!
Now, victim number 2 is a 29-year-old man that tragically lost his life in this vehicular accident. He has been identified as Derek Faustino, and he is a resident of Bulacan, and he was at the airport this Sunday on May 4th, this past Sunday, preparing to depart for a business trip to Dubai. And of course, the LTO temporarily suspends the license immediately of the driver on the NAIA incident here. And of course, that's the least that should be done as the investigation continues on. So again, a little bit into this video, we're going to show you how the responsibilities affect a lot of people here in this accident. So here they actually brought a forklift in, and they brought a tow truck in. They're towing the damaged vehicle away from the crime scene. And then later on, I didn't post all the pictures, but you know, they'll go in and clean up everything and fix the barriers. Those barriers are a problem. They're a big, big problem. They really do not withstand a vehicle. There was 3 of them in here that failed that they had to replace. So they did not really protect people the way they should. And in a later article I just read that the airport is paying for all expenses and taking responsibility for the barriers not being safe enough. Now, that I can't confirm that. I just saw that in one article. So, but I'm just letting you know that's what they're reporting. Okay, now the LTO has suspended his license for 90 days. Okay, because of the fatal crash, of course. They issued what they call a show cause order, an SCO, and they do that to call the driver or the alleged perpetrator of the accident or crime, into the office to discuss and get their side of everything. But this is the catch, you guys. They don't just call in the driver of a vehicle, a motorcycle or scooter. They call in, and in some cases hold responsible for the registered owner of the car, motorcycle, scooter, tricycle, whatever. So this segues us into our liability. And this is for Filipinos as well. But I'm specifically talking about being an expat and being a foreigner here and a guest in the country. How things can play different out in that scene, and you'll see. This is the actual one that we pulled off the internet that is related to the NAIA accident. So they immediately got this out with no delays whatsoever. Now, I'm telling you this because remember, he's a driver for a transport company. We don't have the details as of yet, okay? But they will come out, and they may even be out now after I made this video. But this video is pretty fresh. It's from this morning at 4:30 in the morning. So this show cause order goes to both the driver of the vehicle and the registered owner. And this, again, this opens up a lot of liability if we purchase or buy, let's just say, for example, a scooter. They're going to call the registered owner of the scooter in. So if you bought one and you haven't transferred the documents yet, that will put the person, the seller that you bought from, into a position of responsibility, and he or she will have to go down and appear, okay, at this interview with LTO specialist. If you sold your scooter, motorcycle, or car, let's just say, and someone else has an accident, whether it's an accident or a drunk driving accident, and it involves in injuries or, God forbid, any fatalities, and under Philippine law that's called reckless imprudence and homicide. So let's just say, for example, you sold your scooter and you signed over everything, you did everything you could, made copies of your IDs, attach it to the transfer paperwork. And I believe now they have a law where it has to be transferred in 15 days after the transaction, which usually doesn't happen out here. I myself am questioning my son because my son purchased a scooter and still there's paperwork that's not completely transferred. So by you giving a deed of a record of sale to the buyer, that's great. That does show that you sold it, and that does most likely show that your buyer of your scooter took possession, or your buyer of your car took possession, or motorcycle, whatever it is, and they get in an accident. Well, you will be called in to LTO simply because your name is still on there. And in the Philippines, most of us know it's typical. The first 3 years of registration is free. So people do this a lot. They might purchase something from a private party, and the paperwork, or sell something to a private party, and the paperwork is not properly done. They get on, your buyer gets on the scooters, driving, is having fun. Last thing they're thinking about is paperwork, right? So the problem with that is you as the seller becomes liable, okay? Me as the seller becomes liable. So we want to avoid that at all costs, because now we're putting our life in the hands of someone we don't even know, probably, in hopes that they don't drink and drive, in hopes that they don't accidentally, hit somebody or even get hit. Even if they're a victim, again, they're going to pull who's the registered owner, as well as, interview the driver and get their information. This could be a big problem. What if you're back in your home country for a trip, or you're on business, or you go to a different country to vacation? What are you going to do? This could be not only traumatic, but it could be very expensive to have to come back for something like this. And these are orders you cannot just ignore. This next one, and it's the last accident video, this next one, just as the NAIA one, but this one involves an American driver. And this is the part that I can't stress enough to expats, foreigners out here. The liability that we hold when we drive these streets in the Philippines. I know when I used to drive my car around, we get so used to driving here. I mean, I've driven for so many years. I've driven in New York and Chicago and California and all that. But out here, it's like a video game. You know, I told our friend who's a barangay captain one day, we were having lunch, and I said, yeah, it was my first few months here. I'm like, yeah, unbelievable. It's like a video game out here. You know, you're weaving in and out, you're dodging motorcycles and tricycles and other cars, and it's. But you know what he told me? He said, it'll only make you a better driver, and he was right. You know, throwing all those challenges at us, now we're more aware of what to look for. We can get the feel of when a motorcycle puts on a left blinker and goes right, or puts on a right blinker and goes left. So it's not always what you're used to in the States or the UK or wherever you're from. Out here, it's a different world of drivers, and I'm not bashing them in any way, but part of the problem, and why some of these accidents happen, is that people get driver's licenses and they really haven't gone through any sort of a training course. And I know that might sound ridiculous. I'm a 46-year-old Filipino, or I'm a 60-year-old American. It doesn't matter, because now, if you're a Filipino, you already know the culture of driving out here, okay? And if you're, a 60 plus or 50 plus American, you know how to drive. You have the skills. We've been driving for years. But we don't know the culture of the drivers out here. We don't know their habits. So again, anything is like a weapon, especially a vehicle. So vehicles are tremendous liability for foreigners. And we really, really have to think about what could happen, even in a minor accident. They could take you into custody for a minor accident. And I've read about it, I've seen it, and I've heard about it through friends that have friends. One of our relatives, got in a tricycle on tricycle accident. They impounded them both, and they took both of them into custody. They didn't stay long, which is another thing we're going to go over. Bailable offenses on homicides and things like that. This occurred in Cebu on November of last year. And he's a 66-year-old American man named Stephen Taylor, and he was driving his pickup, and he rear-ended a tricycle along a national road. So, the result of this was the tricycle driver died. He's 48-year-old Abner Quinones. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, out of respect to him and the family. And again, our prayers go with Abner and his family. Now, the driver, Stephen Taylor, was unharmed, and as of that date, he is currently detained with the police pending potential charges of reckless imprudence that results in homicide. So there it is, you guys. Here it is again. Reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. It could be the slip of a gas pedal, the slip of a brake. It could be one of us behind that wheel. And it could be a tricycle or scooter or motorcycle in front of us, or to the right of us, to the left of us, and he could be putting on his blinker and we think he's going right, and we're just going to sort of overtake him and pass him, but he makes a left and boom, he's now under our car, okay? And hate to be graphic, I'm sorry, but that could happen in the flash of an eye, in the heartbeat, in half of a heartbeat. So I'm really, really urging you to watch this and understand our liabilities. I do not want to see any of our community, our expats, our foreigners, put in this position, including myself. I don't want to be put in that position, because that's going to affect our families. It's going to affect our families. And in some cases, as you've seen in the first NAIA episode, it killed a child. And it killed another person whose children depended on that man. So it affects families, and it's a ripple effect. So let's go on with this and see. This is the tricycle. This is the damage it did, and as you can see, it just tore off the back axle, the wheels in the back, and you can see the rear tires bent up. So The driver most likely sustained his fatal injury by flying forward, and possibly, hit something that was in front of the tricycle, whether it be, the street itself, and got head injuries. There's no details enough yet, but the victim's family was waiting for the relatives of the American driver to visit the police station and decide on what action to take. Okay? In the States or the UK or anywhere else, we say, what do you mean decide on what action to take? Yeah. Keep him detained. And you'll see why here. It says at the bottom here, on whether to file a complaint is option 1, or whether to settle. And here's where the settlement comes in the Philippines. And I know most of you already know about this. Things don't go to court very often. They get settled here. That's a good thing and that's a bad thing. It depends on what side of it you're on. So the accident happened when the drunk foreigner, and that becomes a problem, okay? Right there, if you're driving drunk, just as it is in any country, it could go all wrong, okay? And in this case, it did. It killed someone whose family depends on them, for financial support, emotional support, and parental support. So the foreigner was drunk, and he rammed into the back of the tricycle. So this is a case of, do we settle, the victim's family says, or do we let it play out in court and hope that they do a criminal prosecution against the perpetrator, the driver? And, it's hard for me to call this an accident, you guys, because if this is true, which the articles show, the statements from the local police state this, if this is true, though, I don't believe it's an accident, because it's not an accident when you drink irresponsibly, or if you drink anything and get on the road. It's just not. So I don't really, my opinion, I don't classify this as an accident. You can make, please send your comments. How do you feel about that? Because some of you may have actually, been within an arm's length of this sort of situation, whether back home or whether here. So yeah, please, we're open to all comments on this. Did the Americans settle with them? We don't know yet, because they haven't made that public yet. And I don't think at this point they will. Obviously some form of a settlement happened, because it's not reported that this person is in prison. That would have made news in and of itself. So apparently a settlement is my best guess is what happened here. And I'm just hoping that the foreigner, learned a very valuable lesson about drinking and driving on the roads, especially here in the Philippines where he lives. It brings to our attention the part of settlements in the Philippines and what may happen. Let's just say, for example, you or I are driving our scooter. Let's just say most of us have scooters. Some of us have both cars and scooters, but let's just take scooter for an example. And we accidentally plow into a group, who's a family, and a fatal accident occurs. Well, that family too may go through the same thing with deciding, well, do we want this foreigner, arrested and prosecuted and, go through the court, or do we just settle? Because, it may have been the breadwinner of the family, and maybe now they have no income. So are they more financially, pressured to settle? And here's how that works, because I had to research it. My wife told me this for years, and I'm like, what do you mean? In fact, in one discussion my wife and I had with the serious bus drivers, it's like, yeah, we don't, if they get in an accident, they really don't want, and I'm not just talking about Cirrus only, I'm talking about all of the transport companies, let's say. They don't want their drivers to get in any accident. So don't get me wrong, obviously, they're well trained, they're told, they're briefed on what to do if they do have an accident. There's protocols in place. They have safety people on those buses at all times, riding those buses, getting on and off, checking, for all kinds of things. So, but, the bottom line of it was, and again, I don't know if this is confirmed because I've never been a bus driver out here for any of the companies, but the environment dictates, look, it is better off that the victim of the accident pass on than, you know, be in a vegetative state of some kind where there's just chronic care going on with the victim, which is chronic economic expenses. So, and I thought, my God, that's just horrible, you know? That's horrible to talk about. But you know what I'm saying, right? It's do we want a victim, you know, on their near-death bed, you know, for 20 years of their life, paying, you know, thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of pesos a day or a month to support the victim? Or is the victim better off just gone, you know, and not that kind of a humanitarian burden? I don't know if I'm using those words right, and it's sad to think about, but it's I believe, my opinion, it's true. It's true, because I wouldn't want to be in that position. I wouldn't want to be the victim lying on the bed for 20 years or 10 years, or, you know. So the environment, and this leads me into these points, okay? Let's take a look at these points for settlement, why they do it, what the purpose of it is. Okay, so we're going to go over this, okay? Settling in the Philippines is very common, okay? It's very common for any kind of an accident, especially if it involves a death, you know, an accidental death. There is framework with this. So there's legal framework is bullet point 1, restorative justice culture, okay? And that just means that that's the culture of the Philippines. You know, we want to restore and make whole the victims or the families of the victims. That's just the culture. The third bullet point is the financial need of the victim's family, which ties into that. Of course, if a loved one is lost, God forbid, the family still has to go on, right? And that's true with anybody. So the family needs to go on, and the victim would want that. So that, again, pushes people into a settlement environment. Fourth bullet point, avoiding lengthy legal battles. And a lot of us some of us have had that firsthand. I know that I have in a civil case, and there was no death involved. But lengthy court battles, oh man, it's just stressful, and sometimes it doesn't serve anybody well. It doesn't serve the victim's family. It doesn't serve the alleged perpetrator. Settlement just seems to make more sense, and I commend the Philippines and the culture for thinking that way, because it used to be that way in a lot of countries. Okay, I know in the States many years ago it used to be that way, where a prosecutor would say, hey, do you want to press charges? And we all remember that from even the old movies that we watched, right? Yeah, I'm dating myself now, but you know, hey, do you want to press charges? And the victim might say, no, I don't. And then the prosecutor gets, gets all upset. Well, that's that. There's no case, and life goes on. That changed in most countries, and in the States that changed, as we all know. But here, the settlement environment is still here. And again, it seems to work in the Philippines. So I'm not bashing it, but I'm talking about working in the sense that, you know, for accidents, okay? I'm not talking about intentional homicide or first or second degree murders or things like that, all right? And now the last one is the perpetrator's willingness to pay. And I think as an expat foreigner, we all know what that means, right? You know, it's the first thing. It's like, what's your willingness to pay? And, you know, I had previous videos on scams, you know, whether it's at the airport or whether it's on the road, you know, and you allegedly ran a red light and you've got traffic enforcers, you know, wanting to give you a ticket and you come back to court. Or do you want to settle right now? Just pay that bill right now. Now that is not legal here, and the Philippines does not encourage that. But it happens. We know it happens. It's reality. So let's not tuck it under the bed. Let's just talk about it, okay? We know it happens. It happens just like skin tax happens, and you know, all kinds of things. That's okay. It's okay if we are going to live here, and we're going to live here as guests, we need to know the rules of the game. And if we know the rules of the game, then we can play the game just as skillfully as anybody can, whether you're from here or not. So just know the rules, and that's part of what these videos are about, okay? Know the cultural environment here. Know what could happen. So perpetrator's willingness to pay, I don't even really have to go into that. We know what that is. Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I hit your tricycle by accident and I see your wheels busted. What can we do about this? How do you want to work this out? You know, back and forth. Okay, $25K should get you back up and running in business so you can keep making money. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. Thank you, sir. Bye. Okay, so that's a good thing, right? We don't want to type courts and for something like that, okay? However, in the case of the NAIA, however, in the case of the airport accident, this could be a whole different set of rules. It may not be. There may be settlements going on here. So a lot of things come into play here. So as we talk about, it's common in the Philippines for the family of a deceased traffic accident victim to reach a cash settlement. They call that amicable settlement or civil indemnity. Okay, that's with the driver or perpetrator, and this is instead of pursuing full criminal prosecution, especially in cases of reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. I'll say it again, reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. Now, the NAIA airport incident could fall into that category. It wasn't intentional. There was no intent there from what I can see, and that's my opinion. Now, talk about the legal framework, bullet point 1. Under Philippines law, reckless imprudence resulting in homicide is a bailable offense. So many drivers are not immediately jailed or can post bail awaiting trial. So what good is it, maybe if you don't want to make a settlement, and if nobody was hurt, the person's going to most likely bail out, you know, and they're going to be on the streets, just like our friend who was murdered. His brother was murdered, right? And that's not something that's good. You don't want a murderer walking around the streets. But again, that's the legal framework. Point 2, restorative justice culture. And we talked a little bit about this. There's a strong tradition of resolving disputes amicably, like through the barangay justice system and that sort of thing, and informal settlements. We see that all the time when, you know, if you have an incident or a problem with someone, whether it's a civil issue or a criminal issue, you go to the barangay and you both talk it out with the barangay captain, and he can determine what should be done and make a recommendation. And I think that's a great thing. It's almost like having a mediator. And things, even in other countries, I know in the US they have mediation hearings and they have mediators that could be appointed, so that way we're not going in front of judges and getting court dates and things like that. I think that's a good thing in my opinion. Not in every case. It depends on the case though. 3, financial need of the victim's family. Here we talked a little bit about this. There could be funeral expenses, lost income, and a settlement often results, usually from what I can gather, the average settlement in a reckless imprudence homicide can vary anywhere from 100 to 500,000 pesos. It depends on what the income was of the victim and what the family agrees to. So avoiding lengthy battles is point 4. Trials can drag on for years in the Philippines, as an example of our friend now going over 8 years. Families may opt for an immediate settlement over an uncertain, drawn-out court case, and we all know that. We don't know what's going to happen. If it goes to trial, you never know. You can feel like you got the strongest case in the world, and all of a sudden, what? They're found innocent, or they're found guilty, depending on what side you're on. Well, So many things play into that, as we know. Politics play into that, money plays into that, who's in office, who the judge is, because they all have different opinions and they all interpret the law sometimes a little bit differently. So the last thing is perpetrator's willingness to pay. Interesting one, yes. If the driver is willing to offer a substantial amount, sometimes as part of a humanitarian consideration, families may accept this rather than push for jail time. Well, that's an interesting term they use, humanitarian consideration, and I suppose that could be one of many definitions, so of settlement. So that kind of lays out the framework of the settlement. So as we close this episode, I want to read one last thing here. I want to read it. I know it's up on the screen, but we pause to honor the lives tragically lost in the recent accident at NAIA Terminal 1, a young child and an adult whose journeys ended far too soon. May the Lord welcome them into his eternal embrace where there is no more pain, only peace. Our prayers go out to their families that they may find comfort in God's presence during this time of sorrow. And we cite Psalms 34:18. Look, you guys, again, the big takeaway of this is I hope that you have a little bit more insight. I'm still learning. We all are. We know that. It doesn't matter how old or young we are. About our liability in a country that we're guests in. And we need to be really, really in the know. What's the old saying? I didn't know what I didn't know. Most of us know what that means. So let's leave our prayers with these families from all these accidents. Both children and adults died, and it is a sad, sad thing. And it's a heavy heart for me to even make this video, but I want awareness in our community. So thank you for watching, and God bless until our next video.